quick announcement. We have a Foundation for Success course next week at the DeKalb Board of Realtors. It's going to be Monday and Tuesday, the 23rd and 24th. We have a capacity of 35 students, and right now we have 31 registered. So there are still a couple of spots left. For those of you who are interested and want to learn more about CCIM, that would be the class that we highly recommend. The next one, we're going to have a training for the site to do business. Anybody use the site to do business here? Maybe one or two? All right. We're going to have a course. It's going to be a 2-day, which is a basic and an advanced class. And that is going to be in October the 23rd and the 24th. You can get more info on our website. It's there as well. And then we have our economic luncheon, November the 21st, at the Cherokee Country Club. The registration will be soon. You can find it on our website. We do that every year. It's a great luncheon. It's a great program. We would love to see you guys there. So now let's go to why you guys are here, which is to listen to this great group of people that we have here, experts of the field. You all know all of them, but let me introduce our moderator, the one and only, Kirk, Rich. Let's give a big round of applause.
Thank you, and the world is glad there's one and only. So it's an absolute honor to be here. Oh, Marcy.
Real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt, guys. Just for housekeeping, since we do have a full house today, if you could just ask everybody to squeeze in a seat or two in your section so that your newcomers come join us. That way we'll disrupt the panel today. Thank you.
Sure. Sellout crowd. That's what happens when you get rock stars. So as Leo kind of alluded to, these are people that we all know and have been in our industry and are really the foundation of why we are able to do what we do. So I'm going to introduce them, but they kind of need no introduction, but I'm going to say a few things about each. Dallas Smith, and they're all dear friends, so this makes it so easy. Dallas has been amazing, has been really a groundbreaking person in our industry. Kind of each one of these people are actually. But groundbreaking person in terms of bringing minorities into commercial real estate, which we still have a long way to go. And we're working hard at. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. But he owns T. Dallas Smith. Before that, he was the first African-American broker at Cushman & Wakefield, which is a great story. You need to have him tell you that story one day. He's served on the Georgia State Foundation. He does a lot with Georgia State. And just all around, he's got leadership positions all over the city. So he doesn't just do brokerage. And I think that's one of the things you're going to hear more and more about each of these people is they're well-rounded within community too. They believe about giving back as part of their life. Then we have Kay Younglove, who was last year's president of the commercial board. It's kind of fun. We have presidents every year. Past president, current president, and in the audience, future president, Jeff Pollock, who'll be next year's president. You'll be on the panel next time. But Kay just left and started her own Kay Younglove brokerage house, which is pretty exciting. And we saw each other in another place that we have places up in North Georgia, and she was gloating about just finishing up her first tenant rep deal under that umbrella, which is really cool. But she was with JLL before that, and again another pioneer. You know, there are not a lot of women in our industry. And she's been in this industry for decades and has been a leader and really a pioneer for women in the industry. So really, really big deal. And then we got John Heagy, who is our current president of the board. Works for Hines, has been in real estate since '77. He got in when he was 3, so child prodigy. And currently working really hard on the project that we're going to be touring later today, the T3 building, which is, we're going to talk a little bit about the new work concept and kind of what happens in that world. So these are our panelists today. So a round of applause just for that. So given that we're going to do the tour of T3, I want to start with John. So, tell us a little bit about T3, how Hines came to that idea, and then more importantly, how is it different from other buildings that are more traditional?
Sure. And thank you, Kirk, for having us here. And it's a great pleasure to be with CCIM here this afternoon, this morning. I see a lot of friendly faces. Well, they're all friendly, but some some faces, let's just say that I know a little longer, Mr. Nutting among those, and some brand new faces as well. So great to be here. So to Kirk's question, how did we get to the T3 and ultimately what we're under construction with right across the street over here at Atlantic Yards? And I think the simple answer is that as developers, we really follow the market. We don't make the market. We don't come up with these grand ideas for the next great office building and just hope that our customers are going to like what we develop or build. We really are listening to what the market's telling us. And in this instance, probably going back about, call it 6-8 years ago, as we were coming out of this last big recession, we were hearing from our employers that what they were looking for in an office building was a whole lot more than what was being delivered at that time. And so we kept probing, kept asking, are you looking for something that's more dynamic? Tell us what you're really looking for. And the answer was very simple. They said that these office buildings that we want to occupy in the future are going to do a whole lot more for us than just house our people to work. We want environments that our people can thrive in. We want our environments that our people are comfortable in every location within the office building, not just our office space, but in every location of the office building. Our people are working long hours with their heads down, at whatever task they might be assigned. We want them to feel comfortable to pick up, walk outside the office building, or rather walk outside our space and have a place of refuge to go to and really enjoy each other's companies and interact with other people in the office building. So, what came out of that, and we're not unique in this respect, but is kind of this genre of office building that we are all now calling creative office space. So it's a building that is more highly amenitized than it's ever been in the past. It's a space that is more energized. It's a space that's activated. By way of example, our new property managers that are operating these office buildings for us, we're sending them all to hotel school. We want them to learn more hospitality skills in terms of dealing with our customers, not just how to handle a hot and a cold call, in an office space, but what are the things that make life more comfortable for them? And so T3 came out of that. The other thing that we wanted to do is not just design a typical office building. We wanted something very unique. What came out of that was timber frame. There's a whole other story that I'll hopefully tell you when we get down to tour T3 here a little bit later today. T3 timber frame building, very unique in terms of its architecture and certainly the construction method. And Atlantic Yards, right across the street, more traditional in terms of the construction method, meaning concrete and steel, but very different in terms of the buildings that are in the Midtown submarket. So we're hoping that, and I think people are voting right now with their leasing. We think we've got a good product, and we're excited about the acceptance of that product so far.
Thank you, John. And Kate, you came from JL, you were top achiever in 2016. I mean, you've been a rock star for more years than we'll talk about. But tell us what it was like when you first got in the business. How did it look then versus how does it look now? And what does that feel like?
Well, good morning. Thanks so much for having us. It's a delight to be with you all. I think back, similarly to John, actually it was the late 70s when I had my first introduction to real estate. I grew up in a small town in Tennessee, but my dad and my uncle were in the real estate business, so I had some exposure to it. And they were always working deals, and I thought it looked fun. So I think back now, and I thought that really probably had a lot of influence on the choices I made. I arrived in Atlanta to finish my degree at Georgia State and was looking for a part-time job. Got a job leasing apartments at the apartment complex where I lived. And I really enjoyed it. I liked the idea of people coming in, making them feel comfortable, showing them how the space would work for them. So I knew my property, I knew my competitors. And as a result, I think one hot August weekend, I leased 5 apartments, which the owners were pretty pleased about. And they called me in one day, just as I was graduating college, and they said, "We know you're not gonna stay here and lease apartments." My degree was at Georgia State Public Relations and Business Communication. I really thought I wanted to work in marketing for Coca-Cola or Xerox or IBM. I just like the whole psychology of selling has always interested me. And that's sort of the trek I had planned until they came to me one day and said, we're about to buy this little office building. How would you like to take a crack at leasing it? You know, if you don't like it, you can come back here and lease apartments until you find the job you want. You seem to be able to do that pretty well. So it was sort of a no-lose proposition that I got into it, and it was baptism by fire. I mean, I graduated, I had just turned 21 when I graduated Georgia State. And in that job, that company, which was Metro Atlanta Properties, Bob Fishback and Doc Doherty, were the owners. And back in the day, we were talking earlier about Bill Butler. He was with Avco. We were buying properties from Avco. But we bought in a rapid succession, within 9 months, 5 office parks. And at 21, I was given those to lease and manage and staff property management also. It was really getting dunked in the deep end of the pool, really, is how I came up in the business. And I think that's a good way, because I think those are the lessons you really learn when you're having to figure it out as you go. And so looking at that, one of the things that occurred in the early days of my career is that there were so few women in commercial real estate. In fact, I was involved in helping start Crew in Atlanta in 1982. And about 2 or 3 of us met for drinks one night on a bar stool and tried to make a list of all the women we knew in the industry. And we came up with about 30 names in the entire industry. But you have to remember, back then there were almost no female attorneys, which there are lots of now. There were very, very few women brokers. There were a handful on the agency side and almost none on the tenant rep side. And there were no female asset managers. We hadn't evolved to that level yet. So we pulled together the 30 women to meet and had the idea of starting Crew to really just be a support and sounding board for one another. And it turned out to be one of the best things we'd ever done. I really credit that. I was with Metro Atlanta Properties for 8 years. During that initial, and I have to tell you, back then too, we developed an advisory board that was all men because we needed to get credibility. So we got, the top executives from around all the firms to be on our advisory board, and that helped give us credibility. And that changed over time. But so anyway, my involvement in leadership there and becoming president of Crew, and I think I was 27, really was the reason I feel like I was hired by John Portman to lease Peachtree Center. It was a way for me to really kind of break out of the pack and show some leadership skills, and I had some responsibility. So I would just encourage young people to look for those opportunities. There's this organization, the Commercial Board, Crew, NAOP. There's so many organizations where you can really distinguish yourself amongst your peers. So that's what I would suggest.
Love it.
Sort of how it all started for me.
Good suggestions. And Dallas, Dallas and John O'Neill with the Commercial Board started a diversity program, which is groundbreaking. And it's just a few years old. But you can look in this room and see that we are more indicative today of our community. 5 years ago, this room would not have looked as indicative. We still have a ways to go. But Dallas, talk about what it was like for you getting in the business, the barriers, and where we are today and where we need to go.
Okay, we've got 3 hours?
Yep, 3 hours and 10 minutes.
I know, it's
Yeah,
it's a hard one to be condensed.
Yes, it's hard. All right, so I started in the business when I was 19. Didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. All I knew is I wanted to make a lot of money. So I took a Forbes magazine, 1982, studied what the issue that has the richest people, the 400 richest people, and I studied what they did. And this is before computers, so maybe before some of y'all were born. This was done by hand, so I literally just categorized, and it ended up being pretty much 4 categories, which pretty much is still the same today. Real estate, oil industry, technology, and investments. So investments, I'm from Atlanta, born and raised. I always say I'm Atlanta born, Atlanta bred. When I die, I'll be Atlanta dead. I am from Atlanta. I'm gonna stay in Atlanta, so that was one of my driving forces. So if I did investments, I really need to be in New York, so that was out. If you do oil, really need to be in Houston, that was out. Technology just wasn't my personality, that just wasn't my thing. So it left me with this thing called real estate. And in real estate, I wanted to have my weekends free, because I was a young single guy enjoying all the things that a heterosexual young single guy does in Atlanta. So I needed to have those weekends free. So I backed into this thing called commercial real estate. And my sister was dating Michael Hightower at the time, who was the most influential person I knew. He was a city councilman. In fact, he was the youngest city councilman in the United States at one time. He was 22 years old when he was a council member. And I called him and asked him if he knew anybody. He said, yeah, he did. So he introduced me to this guy, Bill Colmer Properties. I don't know if anybody knows Colmer Properties. And talked to Bill. I said, hey, can I shadow you one day? Just want to figure out if this is for me. He said, well, I'll work it out. So Steve Galtney, some of y'all know Steve Galtney, Steve let me shadow him one day. And during this time, he started telling me about this acquisition and this disposition, and I was, drinking from a fire hose at 19. None of this made any sense to me. And he said, but I'm going to take you to this meeting. Come to the meeting. You're going to sit in the room, be quiet. Afterwards, you can ask me questions. Sure. So this was a center called Around Linux. And he did the first OptiLens iCrafters lease. And I was in the meeting when he made the deal. They got up, they shook hands, they smiled, we left. He said, you have any questions? I said, yeah. I said, well, it looks like you came to a deal, came to an agreement, you shook hands, you smiled, He said, yeah, we did it. I said, I just have one question. He said, what's that? I said, how much money did you make? He said, I'll make $30,000 off that transaction. This is 1982, when the median income of a family of 4 was $28,000. So I said, Steve, this is what I want to do. So Steve said, hey, we have a small firm, but let me take you to lunch. We don't really have room for anybody else, but let me take you to lunch. When he takes me to lunch, he introduces me to a guy named Tom Thompson. Tom, if you know Tom Thompson, is a retail broker, still in the business today. Tom, this is important to the story. Tom is a white guy, okay? Same age, he's at Georgia State now. We're both at Georgia State. I told Tom what I wanted to do. He said, oh, okay, he was doing the same thing. A couple days later, Tom calls me. He said, hey man, I met this guy. He's looking to hire somebody. His name is Thomas W. Tift. Tift, T-I-F-T. So if you've ever driven from Atlanta to Florida, you went through Tifton County, you passed Tift University, that family. Primarily owned the majority of the land where the airport sits now, 4,000 plus acres. They had 80 acres left over, and he wanted somebody to be his landlord rep on his properties. He had office space, industrial space, retail, and land. Now, he's from South Georgia. His name is Tiff. My first name is Tanalo Smith.
You learned something today.
Yeah.
So I knew Tanalo Smith on a resume was not going to get hired from a guy from South Georgia, last name Tiff. I just knew it. So in all my studying of the 400 richest people, one of the names that stood out was T. Boone Pickens. And then the TV show Dallas was really hot. So I put, I'm giving you the truncated version, but I took the T from Tanalo, Dallas Smith, that's how I became T. Dallas Smith. And I basically whitewashed my resume. So if you looked at the resume, you think I was a 6 foot a blue-eyed, blonde hair Texan. That was what I was going for. And if I had my resume today and put it up here, you'd be like, damn, that is a Texan. So that's what I submitted. Long story short, I come, Mr. Tiff, my buddy, again, my white buddy, says, and the ironic thing was, Mr. Tiff told him, I'm looking for somebody just like you. He told Tom that. To this day, Tom is just that guy. I mean, and he's from Atlanta, just a good dude. I said, Tom, why? Tom never told him I was black. So, to his surprise, when I showed up, I was black then. I'm still black now. So I come in. The secretary said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yes, I'm here to see Mr. Tiff." And she said, "And you are?" I said, "Dallas Smith." And literally, her chair went back. She caught herself on the wall. She got back up and said, "Hold on." Came back. She said, "He'll see you now." I said, "Okay." So. And Mr. Tiff was just cool. I mean, Rhett Butler from Gone with the Wind, that's Mr. Tiff. I mean, he was suave, Southern gentleman. And we ended up talking for 2 hours and found out we had more things in common that separated us. And he brought me in the real estate business. I call him my branch Ricky. He was the guy that gave me a chance at bat. Forever grateful to him. Mr. Tiff is 93 years old now, suffered from Alzheimer's, which is kind of tough to see because physically he still looks great. But he brought me in the real estate business. So at that time, there were 0.3% black people in commercial real estate. 0.3. 2019, we're at 1.3. So we've moved a point in 37 years. So we still have a long way to go. So when John O'Neill called me saying, this was his key issue he wanted to deal with, now, mind you, being the black guy in the business, I've gotten these calls a lot of times. And a lot of times it's been from people who just want photo ops, nothing real substantial. And I basically told John that, I said, watch the movie. He called me on a Sunday, telling me what he wanted to do. I knew John, but I didn't know him that well. I said, well, watch the movie 42 and call me back. He's like, but you're going to do it, right? You're going to help me. I said, watch the movie 42. Y'all know the movie 42 is a story about Jackie Robinson. And it had just come out. I said, watch the movie and we'll talk. Okay. A week later, he calls me and said, Dallas, you going to do it? I said, did you watch the movie 42? He said, oh, no, I didn't watch it. I said, watch the movie, we'll talk. A couple weeks later, he calls me, hey, Dallas, I saw the movie. So we talked about it. I said, tell me what stood out about it. He went, man, it was tough for Jackie. Jackie had a really tough time. That's what most people think. Jackie Robinson had a tough time, Jackie. Yes, he had a tough time. But I said, what's your real takeaway? He's still talking about Jackie. I said, I want you to watch the movie because the reality of it is what I'm talking about has absolutely nothing to do with Jackie. Has everything to do with Branch Rickey. The white man who hired Branch Rickey, who hired Jackie Robinson, who overnight changed baseball, integrated it. And I said, you got to have what Branch Rickey had if you're going to do this. He said, what's that? I said, balls. I just told him straight up. I'm 57 and I don't have time to bullshit. So if we're going to do this, let's do it. He said, all right. I said, if you also notice, Branch caught more heat from his own peers, not black folks. Black people, hell, you're singing to the choir. It's like, do y'all want freedom? Yes. I mean, that's not a hard question. No. Your pressure is going to come from somebody who looks just like you, and you got to be prepared to deal with that. And John, to John's credit, he's been prepared to do that. So CRE Studio, the mentorship program, Empire Board, being on the board, the Atlanta Commercial Board, and also CRE Race Awareness, were all 4 things that really started because of John. And so I'm forever grateful to that. I've talked too much. I'm shut up.
No, but amazing. I mean, all 3 and to the point that Dallas and Kay have made, we have a lot of work to do. And everyone in this room who's in this industry, and any industry you're in, we each have that responsibility within community and work to make sure that we represent who we serve.
And I have to say,
yeah,
a big thank you to you. One of the first things Kirk did was make sure that I met Richard Slayton. Richard Slayton, who was past president of CCIM, and also my golf buddy every Saturday now, who I beat most of the time now. So, thank you.
My honor. Yeah, Dr. Slayton and I are very good friends. But yeah, and Richard was a past president of CCIM, Georgia. So we're all trying to make this more indicative and more successful, but to the point of 0.3 to 1.3, it's a long way to go. With women, still a long way to go. There's a lot of women getting in real estate, but are they at the top positions in real estate? No, not really, not yet. So we need to help elevate those folks. Let's go back to real estate.
Yes.
So a lot of news lately about the IPO of WeWork. And as I think everybody would understand and agree, WeWork has changed our industry. It's been a change agent, if not a disruptor. So let's start with you, Kay. Tell me your opinion or your take on what's happening with the new evolution of that collaborative work environment versus the stuff that we're hearing with the IPO and where we think that might evolve. And each of you, I'm going to get each of you to speak on it.
Well, you know, technology has really disrupted so many businesses in a way that's somewhat unprecedented. I mean, we have had changes to our industry that are more subtle. I mean, back years ago, people bought real estate and would hold on to it for a long time. I mean, I leased One Atlantic Center across the interstate. Those of you who've been around a while say the IBM Tower, but I leased that for over a decade, and Sumitomo Life Realty owned it for over 20 years. That's, you know, there's still a few companies that do that. Hines has longer hold periods, you know, the some of the institutions, but there's so many REITs and other groups that are prominent in the market, and the MO is, you know, buy value add, excuse me, buy value add, improve it, and flip it. So we've been in a cycle that's kind of like flipping real estate, right? So the immediacy of being able to make changes and to see value added, and of course that's where folks like John and me come in. But it is, I think, a lot of why these 3 to 5 year hold periods is a lot of why brokerage and especially landlord representation has now become something the big shops do, and fewer in-house. There are fewer in-house folks like John. I mean, the positions of Hines and Highwoods and, you know, a few companies around town with permanent staff to do leasing is kind of not how it's being done so much anymore. So that evolution has changed things, and now we enter an even shorter cycle, right? Shorter hold period of real estate. I can't see, I mean, the cow's out of the barn, I think, you know. We're not gonna go back, I don't think, to the way things were. I think the ability to not carry a lot of real estate obligation on books because of the, you know, the M&A activity in the market, and everything is just sort of at a frenzied pace, I think, compared to how it's been in our past history. I think that's going to continue. So I think there's just going to be sort of a new methodology for valuing these properties that have the shorter lease terms. And, you know, I would think, you know, I'm not an investment salesperson, but many of you here are, and I'd love to hear your opinions. But I would think we're going to have certain properties that start to be valued almost more like you'd value a hotel or apartments, where you know there's going to be turnover, but and you expect that, but what, you know, look at the history. Is this property well located? Do they have a history of staying full? All those things. So there's just a bit of a different valuation model, I think, that's going to come into play than what we've traditionally had, which is solid, you know, long-term leases.
Right. John?
So I think you wanted that answered kind of in the context of WeWork and what's happening with WeWork, and certainly you use the word disruptor. That's to put it mildly, what they've done to our market. And there are many companies like Hines that after experiencing the early days of what the WeWorks of the world, Industrious, there's many others, what they were doing within our buildings, to our customers, that we all kind of decided, I think it's time that we push back. And so, I'm not sure if you all saw in the Wall Street this past week, and we certainly didn't mean for it to come across as we were pitting ourselves against WeWork, but Hines now, and many others, I say, major investors have formed their own co-working companies, and for us, it's an organization that we call Hines Square. We call the product that we're producing The Square, and it's kind of to Kay's point. We recognize that some of our clients are looking for shorter term obligations. They're looking for more flexibility. They want to be able to accordion up and down with their leasing. So that's kind of in response to that. But when you think about it, and I wish that this had come out more in the article, co-working, there's nothing new about co-working. Co-working was going on 40 years ago when I came into this business. It was just a different enterprise. It was people that didn't want to work out of their homes. They wanted to work in kind of a semi-collaborative environment. So WeWork just pushed the limits on all of that, and kind of to the point of their IPO and what's happening there. We do business with WeWork. So, for sake of full disclosure, we have WeWork in our buildings in the world. It does scare us a little bit when you look at the WeWork model, because they are long-term customers with a very short-term view as to how they're handling their customers. And we're making big investments to get the WeWorks set up, and then it's up to them to keep their spaces relevant rather. So it's concerning and not so surprising that the investment market kind of pumped the brakes and said, not sure we agree with the valuation that you're putting forth. So that's not a big negative on WeWork. I think they do a fabulous job with what they do. We're trying to be more fabulous, sir, with our product.
Right. Dallas?
It's a concern for me, sort of 50-50. Back in the day, it used to be more mom and pop type folks who would lease that type of space.
Right.
But now we're starting to see more enterprise
Big
corporations leasing that space. And in fact, WeWork statistics say by 2020 they're looking to go to almost 50% enterprise versus small tenants, which is interesting. But the thing that they're doing right, they're paying the brokers, and they're paying the brokers 10% on a 1 year. Yeah, they're paying the brokers 10% on a year lease, which back in the day, if you did a 1 year lease, that would be at best fractional. They'd give you 33%. Am I right? Because typically you wanted a 3-year term to be a full lease. So the idea of going for if you had to represent a tenant who only wanted a 1 year lease, you as a broker, you're almost like a non-starter. Oh my God, because you already know you're going to cut your fee. But now these guys are going to pay 10%, and they're paying on the whole stack. So instead of a $30 square foot rent, with the furniture, they're paying on the furniture, operating costs, everything. Now they're at a $90 rent, and they're paying on that. So I'm saying that to say that's good for the brokers, I think, temporarily. But my big question at the end of the day is how sustainable is
it sustainable?
Can
Right.
you really continue this model? So I'm 50-50 whether or not this thing, becomes just a fixture in our industry.
I think the idea of a component of space being offered with shorter term leases to provide the flexibility, I'm trying to clarify what I said earlier, which I think that is going to stay around, because I think companies want that. And what do we do? What did John just say? You provide what companies are looking for. So you've created this model at Hines, and I think I know Bridge, I think, has created this model. A lot of different owners are creating a model, so I'm not sure what it means exactly for WeWork as a company based on how they're approaching it. But the dynamic of this offering to the market, I think, is gonna stay.
Which is not rare, because if you get a disruptor, sometimes that disruptor disrupts and fails.
Right.
And I think everybody's looking out to the horizon for that recession, and when that recession comes, what happens?
Right.
Because we know that term leases typically keep people functioning. If they have the ability to terminate all the time, will they stay? But to the point you just made about commission, because a lot of people in the room are commission dependent. We're getting 10% today from WeWork, but is it ultimately the disruptor to get rid of brokers?
Somebody who's a corporate real estate executive told me about a visit from WeWork to talk to them about doing direct business. So, you know, I think there's a model of trying to get all these relationships for blocks of space around the country directly with companies. So I think while they are paying deal to deal, if you have a deal they want, I think there's another effort that sort of is circumventing brokers, so.
Yeah, and I'll just, not to be too controversial here, but I think.
There's no press in the room, I don't believe, so
Yeah.
you're good.
At the end of the day, I'm not really sure that the whole notion of enterprise, meaning that the WeWorks of the world are gonna take over our relationships with our customers. I mean, you know, the math on that enterprise deal is breathtaking in terms of what they're paying for that service and that flexibility. It's more than breathtaking. It's shocking, you know, as to what they're paying for. You know.
Premium.
And John, explain to the folks in the
Huge
room,
premium.
enterprise, explain what
Well,
that
yeah,
means.
so in short speak, instead of having a direct relationship with the developer or the owner of a building, Hines, a company X goes to a WeWork, leasing a large block of space, so not just, you know, 7 or 8 employees, I mean, upwards to 100,000 square feet in some cases. And where we would charge them, just go and do simple math, $50 a square foot, all in full service, they will pay $100 to $150 a square foot for the benefit that they get back. They don't have to manage the space themselves. They don't have to build the space out. WeWork's doing that for them for, in essence, a 5-year term, where we would be normally, you know, booking them for a 10 or even a 15-year term. Those big tenants, you can't put them in your building and really make the math on your building work on a 5-year lease. So that's the enterprise notion, and the concern for, again, a big landlord, if that's really their model, you know, when that big tenant moves out and that space has been customized for that tenant, what happens then? Who's investing the money to rebuild that space? Is it going to be WeWork? I mean, WeWork's been getting TI allowances from landlords in the, you know, 3 figures, $100 a square foot. We can't afford to keep feeding that into a WeWork model. So anyway.
Got it. Dallas, any take on the disruption to commissionable?
Well, you know, it would be clarified, it's 10% on that first year.
Right.
But if it's a 3 or 5 year deal, it's 5% on the remaining term. So whichever one is greater, the greater 5% or the 10% on the first year. I think, particularly in Atlanta's probably we do deals all over the country. Right now, we're actively in 36 states doing different deals. And Atlanta is the only market where you're getting a pro fee. So we had to explain to one of our enterprise clients what a pro fee was. And they couldn't understand why that was, but I'd still contend that Atlanta, being such a real estate-led, brokerage-led community, I think landlords would be really crazy to cut them. I mean, it's like they're cutting their nose off the face if they stop paying brokers. So I don't see that happening at all. So I think, again, this is heavily relationships. It's a relationship business, and it's hard to, even on our enterprise companies who are doing direct deals with WeWork, will direct WeWork to call their broker. So even, we've got this deal set up, but you're gonna deal with our broker in Austin or in Atlanta or whatever.
So it's the same as ever. Your job is to keep that relationship sound, so they feel that you're gonna represent them because they trust you to represent them well, and they feel like they do need representation in their dealings with the WeWorks of the world, so.
Absolutely.
That still goes back to relationships, right?
But to the point that we all need to recognize is things are changing, especially for younger people in the room that are getting into the industry. It will change. So try to stay ahead of the WeWorks of the world, which is not a bad thing, to John's point. It's a new format, a new formulation, and redefining the way people underwrite buildings. I mean, it really goes beyond just rent rate, commission, and structure of a lease. It really is changing everything about how buildings are built and how they're underwritten. I'm going to open it up to questions in just a minute. I want to end with 2 questions, and we're going to do quick rounds. State of Atlanta today versus 5 years from today, how do we look with commercial real estate? Dallas, you're first.
Extremely strong.
That's a good one. Okay.
I think we're going to maybe level out a little bit. I don't anticipate big dips. That's sort of my view.
John?
Yeah, I'm going to maybe answer in a little different way. I think in terms of our industry, what we do in the market, I think you're going to see more consolidation. I think our customers, the people that we are partnering with, they're looking for efficiency. They've been working with the aggregators on equity, but that's all that they do. Our customers are looking for, and I think your customers are going to be the same way. They're looking for people that do more, that are able to provide not only great investment advisory services, but also follow through and operate these buildings. So there's going to be more consolidation for sure, and I agree wholeheartedly. There's always going to be a role in this market for brokers. It's almost inconceivable that, and very rare do you ever see it, that a customer walks in the door and says, you know what, I don't have a broker, but I want to do a deal with you. That doesn't happen. You know, everyone wants to be, needs to be. I can tell you, we embrace it. It's so hard to get a deal done with a direct client because they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
God bless them, but they need that professional service. It really is a great service, not just for the customer, but also for the investor, the landlord.
Right. Yeah, it's complex.
Yes.
I mean, it's too complex to do it with technology for larger deals. I think there'll be a point where the smaller deals, and that's the disruptor of these collaborative work environments, maybe
Perhaps.
they could, but
Perhaps.
we'll find out. Piece of advice you give to young people getting in the business today?
Learn to play golf.
And I don't, and I wish I did. So
Do what you say you'll do. In the time frame you say you'll do it. And if you can't, follow up and let the person know why.
So there are two categories that you've asked us to think about. Young people, you know, I would say absolutely explore all sectors of the commercial real estate industry. Don't get hung up on office just because you have been shadowing an office guy or gal. You know, explore all those sectors. Introduce yourself whenever you have an opportunity. You know, seek out opportunities to be involved. Don't sit on the sidelines.
great. We've got about 5 to 10 more minutes, and we're going to go and do the T3 tour for those that would like to tour John's building. But let's open it up to you guys. So, any questions?
I had a question for John about service office. For a WeWork or another service provider, do you handle the restoration requirement any different for them versus a traditional tenant? Like Cushman can leave this space, they just need to remove their furniture and belongings, but they don't need to go ahead and refurbish the place like they do in Europe. Are you handling any different with a non-traditional build-out?
Yeah, I mean, great question. And, you know, it's not just for the WeWorks of the world, it's for other customers that are highly specialized. It really depends upon the length of the lease term, and frankly, for us. But generally speaking, if you take a WeWork, not that we're picking on WeWork this morning, but if you take a WeWork, if you look at the way they're built out, they have this labyrinth of private space that they have created. It's really, it's quite a bit. And to think that that has any usability for another tenant down the road is folly. So we would try, I think, in our lease to have that customer take all of that space, all of those improvements out themselves. I'm not sure how successful we'd be because, you know, we've had a 15-year term with them, you know, so.
Other questions?
So John, real quick, we're here, you know, at Atlantic Station.
Yes, sir.
Just curious, as Hines is taking control of Atlantic Station, you've got the great office building going up and all the new construction going on here with different tenants. How's Atlantic Station doing as a project since you guys have taken ownership?
Well, we're the third owner in, and frankly, we're excited about that. It's a bit of a long story, but suffice to say, we acquired the first two office sites before we were owners here. But because we had done our due diligence on the acquisition of those sites, we knew that Atlantic Station was on an upward trajectory with North American Properties and CBRE Global. When the property came on the market to buy, we jumped at the opportunity. And I think the big difference here for us is that we brought in a long-term hold partner. Morgan Stanley has put this in their prime fund, and we're year two in a 20-year hold. You know, to your point. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of runway to make improvements to this project that, you know, a merchant build kind of a mentality wouldn't have. So that's why you're seeing the center core, the center green being rebuilt. We're rehabilitating, you know, the majority of our retail tenants. I mean, that's why we think long term our office customers will want to stay here, is because of what this represents. It's the, you know, an oft-used word or a phrase, but it has kind of the Avalon effect. You look at Avalon and our success up there, it's not because we delivered sexy office buildings, it's just we happen to be in the right neighborhood with those office buildings. So same idea.
Question for Kay. So can you expound on your transition now from a larger global company to starting your own practice? Has there been any surprising challenges, or how have you adjusted from having those bigger resources to?
Well, you know, actually, my own company is not a new thing. I incorporated my company, and one other little bit of advice: any of you who want to do transactional work, don't stop with your salesperson's license. Go ahead and get your brokerage license, and go ahead and incorporate a little company on the side, and just have it sitting out there. Because there will be a time in your life where you may want to draw on that. That time for me came in the mid-90s when I was leasing One Atlantic Center and IBM vacated. I had a contract with them. We had done a 96,000 square foot deal, a 77,000 square foot deal, and we're working on a 300,000 square foot deal when my company got sideways with IBM over a deal out in Texas. And I was getting fired. And Trex Morris, who probably many of you know, who's now head of global real estate with Ernst & Young, was really upset because we had all this activity going. I came to him and I said, so you have to let us go, but what if I did this? What if I start my own little company and we just slide the contract over? I stayed with Prentice. All the leasing I did ran through my company. And actually I paid Prentice a little less of a split after that.
Sweet.
but the idea of it is that saved that significant piece of business. And then I went on to lease John Dewberry's first building with Younglove Inc. So I've done work through that company off and on over the years. So it's just been there. So there was no big transition. I sort of fluffed up the branding. You know, a lot of it is the relationships you have and knowing where to go to get information. And I think it's good to stay, if you're on your own, stay an expert on a certain segment of the market, a certain area of the market. And then I was actually asked to join this group of folks, I think all men. I think the last meeting there were 20 of them, and I was the only woman, but they have their own small companies. And it's a meeting periodically, everybody gets together and shares market information. What are you seeing deals done here and there? So I think it's keeping that network so you don't become isolated, I think is the biggest thing that you need to do when you kind of go off on your own. And so far, so good. I'm enjoying it.
We got a question there, and then Bill.
This goes for the entire panel. That was go last since he is minority. What can we do to increase? I don't know what 1% times 37 is, but what can we do to increase that in a year for minority participants? So start with John on that.
What can we do to increase the number of minorities in the
industry?
Yeah. I'll answer the question in a couple different ways. I think I've got a great friend who's in the financial services industry, and he's challenged, just like we are, to add to diversity, to increase diversity, I should say, in his industry. And I think there's kind of this inherent lack of understanding of what we do. And it kind of starts, and that understanding should start much sooner than when someone is graduating from college and saying, okay, so where do I go? What direction do I go? I mean, I applaud you at age 19, is that what I heard? You were already exploring what you wanted to do? I mean, that really should be starting, frankly, in high school, when people of whatever color are beginning to think about what they want to do in the market or in the job market. So I think the education should start much sooner than just trying to recruit whatever diversity, whatever minority we think we're trying to pursue, right when people are coming out of college.
Okay.
I totally agree with John, and I think we have to be intentional about doing those things. I know at the commercial board, part of the diversity initiative involves student outreach. So we have a whole committee that goes out and meets with students, this at least is at the university level. We had a program last year that we did with Georgia State that was phenomenal, and it's getting that exposure earlier. So they think of commercial real estate as an opportunity. And then, of course, the internship programs that we do at the board that I know a lot of the firms like Cushman & Wakefield, JLL, and all do. I think all those are instrumental. I can tell you just from now, what is it, 5 years since we started the diversity initiative at the board? When you go to our educational meetings on Wednesday mornings, it's a different mix of people than it was just a few years ago. The crowd there is much more diverse. So those are things that are important that we have to continue to be really dedicated and diligent about doing.
Dallas?
So I agree with what they both said. It comes down to three things. Lack of exposure. So that's what we're working on, the exposure piece. Racism was a 900-pound gorilla in the room for a long time, and still is in a lot of places. That's why we started the CRE Race Awareness thing, which is a 2-day thing where a group of us spend all Friday together, all Saturday together, really mirroring what the Leadership Atlanta did. And it's all I can say is it's life-changing. So.
It is. I did it last year, and I will say it's an experience you would never forget.
And so the third thing that we're going to be working on is going to be coming around. We're calling it the Southmore Project. To John's point, we've got to catch people earlier, because one of the impediments of being in this business is straight commission. But in college, you're used to being broke, right? So, you know, ramen noodles it's cool, right? So, but if we can catch you in the sophomore year, you got a year under your belt. Junior year, you got a year under your belt. Senior year, you got a year under your belt. By that third year, you're really coming into your own, start making money. So I was a sophomore when I got into the business. Leonte Benton, who was the reason I started my firm, was a sophomore, has historically been our highest producer in our company. It's critical that we catch students then, because a lot of times people come to me, I'm about to graduate in a couple of months, and I'm like, it's going to be really tough for you, because now you got a student loan, you got a car note, you got all these other things. It's really tough to just go to work for 3 years for nothing. But if we can catch you earlier, I think it'll make a big difference.
And, you know, actually, that was my experience that I was saying earlier, having leased apartments and then gotten right into a job because I'd gotten into the flow of a company who was doing this sort of work while I was still a college student. So I think it's important.
Yeah, and I think the structural component of the way young people get in our business and are paid is problematic. And I think all the big firms are having to relook at that. How do you get really great talent in the door and stabilize them? Still, we're going to take 2 more after that.
Y'all been pretty bullish on several markets. You talked here, you talked about the perimeter, most of you involved in that. Because there's a lot of activity downtown over the last 36, 48 months. And it seems like there's not much happening. People are executing, they accumulated a lot of land, but there's not much repositioning or redoing this. I'd be interested in all, each of your opinion on what's gonna happen with all that, bulk of land that they've, people, are they gonna proceed with it, is it changing, is there issues? I'd like to hear some.
I'm having a hard time.
Are you speaking specifically to the perimeter?
No, I'm speaking specifically to downtown.
I think more like the
Downtown.
Gulch, like the Gulch.
Oh, the
and-
Gulch,
and-
the
and,
whole south downtown.
Underground Atlanta, there's so much redevelopment that's been slated, but is it really gonna happen?
Is it really gonna happen? Yeah. Great question, Bill.
That is a great question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the players that are involved in those projects, they're very patient money. I don't think that they're really that concerned whether they hit this development cycle or not. I mean, the truth is we're probably at the end of the current development cycle. Although our friend Colin Connolly at our event here a couple months ago, he said, I keep hearing from people that we're in the 8th inning, but some people tell us that it's a doubleheader. So get ready. So will those projects go forward? Probably eventually. I mean, they're so large and so impactful, but you're going to see it probably spread over a number of development cycles. This is a good example right here. We're expecting we're going to hit a downturn and we'll have to sail into the next development cycle whenever that will be. That doesn't work real well with our office buildings that we currently have under construction because we've got some expectations and some performance to meet there. But and I think the other thing, not to get too verbose, but and I have this debate with a lot of great friends, and I think it's playing out, hopefully, or as we're seeing it. But I think people are very excited about returning to our cities and not just working there, but living there. And so we're very bullish on markets like Midtown. Downtown, I think, is a great market. I kind of wish we had found a place, earlier on to establish a beachhead there. We've missed downtown, in my opinion. We're here in Midtown, in a big way, but so I'm still very bullish that you'll see those projects go forward.
Dallas, you do a lot downtown. What's your thought on the Gulch?
25 years from now, we'll see something.
Just long term.
It's a long
Yeah, really long term.
it's a very complicated project with a lot of politics involved, and whenever I've seen those two things, Fort Mac, still waiting on Fort Mac. I mean,
Call Tyler.
yeah.
One more question.
With your companies or even in the industry, it's very common to have interns who might come work with you in terms of trying to attract talent in.
We keep interns. They typically be from Georgia. They're from Georgia State, but we're open for internships. Again, what I've always tried to create is an environment of something that I wished existed when I was trying to get into the business. So I have an open door policy, and by the way, if are you on LinkedIn? Everybody's on LinkedIn? I'd love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn, and there's a function on LinkedIn that we all should do where you see the faces. If you click on that, you can activate everybody in the room, so you don't have to keep asking everybody for your name and all that kind of stuff. So I've got mine turned on, so you'll see mine turned on. Let's just connect. And so if you have have a young person who like to think about intern, I'd love to talk to them.
You need to not capture your photos when you do that, just FYI, just in case.
Yes, sir.
Amazing. 3 really and truly legends in our business that are still like killing it. It's just an honor, and they're honored to be your friend, honored to be your associate. So,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Jason, you want to wrap it up? I do want to say one thing though that's kind of funny to what we talked about is getting people in early. Kenesha at our board meeting, we had our CCIM board meeting before we came in the room. Kenesha came to the table with a program for us to go into high schools to talk about CCIM.
Interesting.
So that is a real initiative
terrific.
from a lot of different organizations. I'm in more organizations than I can tell you right now, but almost every one of those are thinking about how do we get younger people at the table and to understand what we do, whether you be banker, lawyer, real estate person, or whatever, because they're not getting the foundation in school. So, thank you, Kirk. Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you for being here. I think the next step, I think we're going to step next door to check out the building. Is that the plan?
Absolutely. Anybody that wants to just walk a couple of blocks, we're very happy. I've got my partner down there to help with some tours, so we can probably take about 15 or 20 minutes to walk through the building, but I hope you'll be wowed. We're very excited about the project. We had our CEO here last week, and it was Jeff Hines, and he walked in and he said, "This is the coolest building in our portfolio." Wow. So, I mean, it is really a neat building. So we would be delighted if you'd like to just take a few minutes to go down to CT3. Please join me in a walk.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. Great job.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
You guys are awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate
That's good.
Kirk, thank you, man.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm going to call you over.
Okay, you got it. You got it.
Hey, John, can you do 10,000?
Okay. Well, you're going to see it again.
I'm gonna see it again. Yeah, we got it.
10,000 in there?
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
I know.
It's almost like a Frankish moment. And I really think it was very good.
Hey, John Heagy. Hey, James. Good to see you. Yes, sir.
Not more related.
I got you. Yes. Yeah. Well, for the immediate future, no. We moved the BET. We're building. Yeah, we're getting ready to build. We're activating the site for the circuit. So, until there's a clear idea of what to do with that site, whether it's more residential, more retail, more residential, we're going to continue doing that. Yeah. Okay. You, man, I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear you. Well, I know you got your. How are you?